Hello everyone, I'm Dead Knight and this is In It to Win It. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave respectful comments on all my videos. Today I'm going to be talking about Season 89, the first season of the United in Stormwind set that just came out. I want to talk to you about my Legend run in Standard, which I completed with Handbuff Paladin. So Handbuff is a really interesting deck because it has a history going back to mean streets of Gadget Sam when we started getting some hand buff cards. And those cards were pretty good, but I don't think anyone really hit Legend with that. It was really tough to get going. And since then, in the couple years that have passed, Handbuff has had some massive improvements. So the most important improvement for Handbuff is that it no longer sparkles your cards to tell your opponent which cards were buffed. So they don't immediately know how many minions are in your hand. They don't immediately know how buffed they are. So it makes it a little harder for them to prepare around your game plan. The next most important thing is that the cards that are doing the buffing are so much better than they were before. So uh, if you compare old hand buff, you've got cards like Grime Street Outfitter, which is a 1/1 for 2 that gives all minions in your hand +1/+1. So now in United and Stormwind, we have Alliance Bannerman, which is a 2/2 for 3 and gives all minions in your hand +1/+1, but you also get to draw a card. So I mean, what a major improvement, that extra card, and it's always going to be a minion that you draw, and so you get so much more value out of this guy. So if you watched my video of what I thought the best card in the set for Paladin was, I said it was Alliance Bannerman, and this is why. He is a key fixture in this deck, leading me to Legend and being one of the strongest decks out there right now. So behind him, the actually might even be better than him in this deck is the new weapon, the Prismatic Jewel Kit. So this is a 0/3 weapon for 1, and whenever a minion loses Divine Shield, you buff up all minions in your hand +1/+1. So you look at this card that you can play on turn 1, and it's going to give all minions in your hand +3/+3. I mean, the amount of value you get out of this card is absurd. It's through the roof. And if I was going to guess on how Blizzard might try to nerf this deck, I would say they might try to take 1 durability off of this and make it a 0/2 for 1. But Prismatic Jewel Kit is a key for how this deck gets designed. You'll notice that there are a lot of cheap Divine Shield minions coming out. So you're even playing Argent Squire, which has been around since Jump Street and is just a 1/1 Divine Shield. So even this guy is key in this deck just to get that early Jewel Kit to buff your whole hand. On top of that, we have Righteous Protector, which is the same thing except it also has Taunt. This is huge because even if you draw this guy late game, you can play a buffed minion that's huge and then play this janky 1/1 Taunt Divine Shield to protect that minion. And you'll see that sticking minions to the board is a key part of your game plan and your win condition, which is even better because most of the minions you play have Divine Shield, so they're really sticky and hard to remove. So once you've got this early game foundation to start buffing your hand, what are you going to do with it? Well, there are a ton of great cards that synergize with hand buff. I mean, obviously every minion in some way synergizes with hand buff because, who doesn't like being buffed? But these are especially key for buffing. And they're new cards that just came out in Stormwind. The first is the First Blade of Wrynn. This guy is a 3/5 for 4 Divine Shield and battle cries to gain rush if it has any additional attack. So, a 3/5 for 4 Divine Shield is a little underwhelming, but it's not bad. And then you give it rush on top of that. 3/5 for 4 with rush and Divine Shield is massive. But then, obviously this guy's getting pumped. So early in the game, you can destroy one of your opponent's minions and stick a 4/6, a 5/7, some really high stated minion to the board. Even just that card alone is difficult for some decks to overcome. Then on top of that, you've got Catacomb Guardian. So this guy is a 1/4 for 3 lifesteal, which is pretty good stats for that. And then you're thinking you got to buff this guy, but it battle cries to deal damage to an enemy minion with the lifesteal too. So you want to kind of hold on to this guy, let him soak up as much buffing as he can, and then if you somehow fall behind, you play this guy with those huge stats, immediately destroy a minion, gain a bunch of life back, and then you have a high health minion with lifesteal that can put you back in the game. So this is, public enemy number one for your opponent. They have to get rid of this guy or else you're getting a bunch of life. It was just a really great swing card that can get you back in a game that you lose. But on top of all these, once you have that buff foundation, really the cards that are going to carry you home are the legendaries. And a lot of these legendaries are from the core set. So you'll have these for free, which helps the deck building a lot. So the cards that are going to make the most impact for you are, you've got Overlord Wrynn, which is a high health minion with rush that buffs your hand. So this guy is great in this deck. And then you have Talon Fordring, who is another huge card. Aside from the fact that it just synergizes so well with every piece of this deck. So, it's as a 3/3 taunt Divine Shield for 5, that it's going to draw your highest cost minion when it dies. So this is going to be great. You can get that extra card draw, which you need for buffing your hand. You're going to fish for that late game card. But the Divine Shield obviously synergizes with your Jewel Kit. It's super sticky, so if it gets buffed, you've got potentially a 6/6 for 5 Divine Shield taunt. Really hard for your opponents to deal with. So that's a great way to really stifle your opponent's game plan. And then the card that it's going to draw in this deck is your top end card is Wrynn. This guy, 7/7 for 8. What it's going to do for you, because of how this deck is built, is it's going to draw 3 cards, and you're going to have Taunt, Divine Shield, and Rush. And if it's already been buffed, you have usually an unstoppable end game plan. So sometimes this guy hits as a 10/10, even if it's just a 7/7 unbuffed. With Taunt, Divine Shield, and Rush, you're going to take out your opponent's largest minion, and you're going to stick a taunt onto the board. So just that by itself is crazy. Best I've done with this is a 17/17. That's pretty much just your opponent's just going to scoop when that happens. But then also the Rush minions it's going to draw. You've got that Overlord Wrynn that I mentioned, but also Blademaster Samuro. Obviously, this guy is the king of hand buff, because once this guy starts getting buffed, he is a full board clear for you. So, you play this guy on turn 5 or 6, and a lot of times it's been buffed with 3 extra attack. So you hit this board with this guy, as a 4/9. You're going to be clearing your opponent's board and sticking a huge minion to the board. A lot of times that's a good way to close out games. Speaking of closing out games, the thing that is the most absolutely devastating from this deck is the burst damage that comes from 2 cards. The first card is going to be Conviction, which we've already had our love affair with Conviction when this guy came out last set. It's going to either be a random minion gets +3/+0 or 3 attack, and then when you get 5 mana, it buffs. It gives 2 random minions that buff, and then at 10 mana, it gives 3 different minions 3 attack. And remember, this still only costs 1 mana. It just ranks up depending on how many crystals you have. So that's really great, especially since you can tutor for that with the Knight of Anointment. So you've got Knight of Anointment and to tutor for Conviction. But what really sends Conviction to the next level is Battleground Battlemaster. So this card is one of the most napped on cards in the set. Like, everybody's sleeping on this. It's so good. 5/5 for 5 to give adjacent minions Wind Fury. This is, way better than Bloodlust, way better than any other closeout card that I've seen in a very long time. And if you couple that with Conviction, you're looking at, more than 12 hidden damage from your hand. So if you have anything stuck to the board and you have Battleground Battlemaster and Conviction in your hand, you have just an explosive, out of nowhere, game-winning combo. So let's say that you have, just one Argent Squire, which, typically an opponent might want to ignore, and then you just stuck a high health minion like Blademaster Samuro down on the board. Let's say it's like a 3/9. So you've got a 1/1 and a 3/9 on the board. The next turn, you can play Conviction and Battleground Battlemaster. So instead of dealing 4 damage to your opponent, you are dealing, let's see, 6, 12, 20 damage to your opponent. So that was 16 hidden damage coming out of nowhere, you know, all at once. So like, so many games I have closed out where I was able to stick some mediocre minions to the board. You know, the opponent couldn't get rid of them, so they just went to the face, or they tried to build their own board, and then they just got rolled over with Battleground Battlemaster and Conviction. Obviously, you want to play the Conviction first, so you don't accidentally buff the Battlemaster. But yeah, just roll through people. And then after that, you've got a couple sleeper stars in this deck. Some late additions for me for this. The first one is Robes of Protection. This is especially good against Shaman and Warlock. Warlock absolutely has to target your minions. Oh, also Mage. Mage absolutely has to target your minions. Robes of Protection prevents them from doing that. They're not going to be able to do anything about your board because these are very weak on minions. So Robes of Protection, a super good card, another sleeper card that you know, somehow never saw play in the year that it's been out, but completely shuts down your opponent's ability to deal with your minion through spells. So I might even consider putting a second one in here, but right now I only have one. The next card that's really great, surprise win for this, is Moonfang. Moonfang obviously synergizes exceptionally well with hand buffs because it only takes 1 damage at a time. So as a 6/3, you know, if it gets hit with 3 sources of damage, it dies. But now all of a sudden, if you buff it and it's a 9/6, it's nearly impossible for your opponent to kill unless they have direct hard removal. So this guy is great too, and I love it at 5 mana. You know, after you run through that Jewel Kit and you play this guy, you know, really difficult for your opponent to deal with, especially decks like Mage that don't have really any hard removal. And finally, this one, you know, I'm still a little bit on the fence about, is Encumbered Pack Mule. So the great thing about this guy, it synergizes really well with hand buffs because it copies itself when you draw it. So that's just an extra cheap taunt minion that gets buffed. So, you know, you draw this guy, doubles itself, and then once you start buffing your hand, you get these extra taunt minions. It's good, don't get me wrong, and it's nice to have that extra value out of all your buff cards, and it's great that it's cheap. But you know, you look at some of the things that are really making this deck move forward, like Battleground Battlemaster and Robes of Protection, and I'm thinking about maybe dropping both the pack mules to double up on those. Up to you, but that's a good place where you might customize. Now, as far as, well, there's another card I want to talk about, which is what I said was the most interesting card in the set in my previous video, which is High Lord 4-Dragon. So this guy's a 5/5 for 6 Divine Shield, and whenever any of your minions lose Divine Shield, you give a minion in your hand +5/+5. So I think that this card is exceptional. I think it is awesome in this deck. You've got so many minions with Divine Shield. If any of them stick to the board, and then you play this guy, you just have, you know, just complete steamroll of a hand coming in after that, especially when you have that Catacomb Guard. So if you somehow fall behind because this guy is a little bit of a tempo loss, you can easily take it back with that or your rush minions. And on my way to Legend, this was a key differentiator against other mirror matches. A lot of decks aren't playing this because they say, well, why would I want to play this guy that makes me lose tempo when I'm playing a minion-centric deck? Well, the reason is because it's so easy to get that tempo back with this deck, especially once you buff something with +5/+5, because don't forget, he himself is going to buff people too. So it's not really a loss of tempo. In fact, if you're playing against a mirror match, it's really just the thing that sends you over the edge and pushes the damage forward at the end. So I love this guy. I think he's great. I do want to mention one other card that I'm not running, but I've seen some other people run, which is the Deep Run Engineer. So this guy's a 1/2 for 2 that discovers a mech and gives that mech 1 less mana cost. So it's sort of like mech studies on a body, you might say. So I've seen a lot of people play this. I really don't get it. You know, it's nice to have that, you know, you get a minion on the board, and then, you know, putting a minion in your hand is great for hand buffs, so you don't, you know, lose any value out of hand buffs. But you know, the card, that guy itself doesn't really do much for you. You know, 1/2, it doesn't have Divine Shield, you know, just gets picked off really easily. So I think this is kind of a tempo loss early in the game. And if there's a certain mech you really want, just play that mech. You know, like Anointment is great. You know, it's a 1/2 for 2 taunt with Divine Shield. You know, great synergies all around. If you want Claw Machine, just play Claw Machine. You want Carousel Gryphon, just play Carousel Gryphon. Like, I don't see why you'd waste time on this guy. You know, you really want to get that your early game, you want to either be getting lots of tempo or lots of buffs, and this is doing neither for you, so I don't see it. A lot of people like it. Going to be up to you. But anyway, so this is a, you know, great deck. It's just bringing so much high statted minions. It's really hard for a lot of other decks to recover once you get some big buffs on the board. So I love it. I love the gameplay. I love the way it all came together, and I'm really excited to tell you all about it. So what do you think of Handbuff? What's been your experience? What cards do you like in it? Make sure you leave some respectful comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tune in next time.